Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Onside podcast. As you know, this season we've been taking a deep dive and taking a look at women's entrepreneurship here in Canada and really trying to highlight amazing women entrepreneurs and leaders who are making a big difference and trying to make an impact on our innovation ecosystem and driving change. These fireside chats are being brought to you as part of the Start Now Incubator project, which is supporting diverse and intersectional women to start and grow their businesses in Canada. And we want to thank the Women's Entrepreneurship Fund for supporting us with that. I'm your host, Alex McCann, and thanks so much for joining us. Today, we have an incredible guest, Joella Hogan, who is the founder of Yukon Soaps Company, a business that's not only about beautiful handcrafted soaps, but also about culture, community, and sustainability. Indigenous owned and operated Yukon Soaps Company creates beautiful handcrafted soaps, shampoo bars, essential oil blends, and so much more. Featuring wild rose petals, juniper berries, a Yukon shape press, and the beadwork of Indigenous artisans, these soaps are literally infused and imprinted with the spirit of the Yukon. For over 20 years, the Yukon Soaps Company has been supporting economic diversification, authentic relationships with customers, and bringing to life the heart of the Yukon. The Yukon Soaps Company has been featured in Flair, Huffington Post, Elle Canada, En Route, Cosmopolitan, Globe and Mail, and probably a whole bunch more. And most importantly, and is supported by the elders in the community in which they live. Joella, I want to say thank you and welcome to the show.
Kemi Sothan, good morning. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to have you here. I'm here in Halifax. I know you're up in the Yukon. I wish we could be in person, but luckily we have some technology that allows us to have this amazing conversation. And Joella, you've been running your business in the Yukon, which has lots of unique opportunities and challenges. Can you paint a picture for us of what it's like to be an entrepreneur in the North, and how does your local environment kind of shape some of your business decisions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful way, I think, to start the conversation, that I feel so lucky in so many ways, but that I'm able to, excuse me, root my business in my community, that it's able to be guided by my culture, it's carried by the land, and is really held up by the people. And so I could have been making soap anywhere, really. But I feel that the business has been successful, and I have just been supported so much by having it in this tiny little community in central Yukon, 4 hours north of Whitehorse, just over 400 people. And it's really beautiful. And I guess because, I'm born in the North, raised in the North, I've created this business in the North, I don't really know what it's like to not have a business in the North. So sometimes it's hard to compare, but certainly challenges, but also so many beautiful opportunities.
I guess that's a good point. They say, does a fish know that it's in water, right? You're there. That's where you're doing your business. What's one of the things that you really find is a unique opportunity for being up in your community? You mentioned you're surrounded by 400 people. What's an interesting opportunity that you've been able to experience as a business owner in the North or in your community?
I think that being able to have direct access to the land. I know that so many Canadians are urban focused, and so many Indigenous people have been disconnected from the land. And I think the fact that, I'm able to have my soap workshop, feet away from a large river and watershed in the Yukon is beautiful, surrounded by forest, that we can walk into the boreal forest within a matter of minutes as well, and being able to harvest the plants that go into the products like that. I think sometimes we take those kinds of direct access to land for granted, and so I really try to remind myself how lucky and fortunate we are to have that.
Yeah, that must be so wonderful to be able to go right out and forage and collect the things that you need and use them kind of right away
Yeah.
in a ready and fresh environment. Yes, we're in Halifax. We are close to the land, but maybe not, and the sea. For us, we're close to the sea, so we do have that bit. Maybe not quite in the same way that you do. We're a little bit bigger, but we have that sounds
Yeah.
kind of similar. That sounds similar. Well, what's something that when you were creating your business or something you deal with now, have you faced any challenges or things that have been kind of difficult to do from being in the North? Before we came online, we talked about You Construct, and there's lots of great resources and things like that. Do you find being in the North, does it make it any more challenging to have your business?
Yeah, I think there are incredible challenges, and I will say that the one that I face the most right now is shipping, of course, right? That the cost to ship the raw materials that we can't harvest or aren't grown in the Yukon, those need to be imported up here. But then also on the consumer end, that when people go to purchase on my website, Canada Post, which is the only option in my community,
Mm.
is really expensive and a barrier, unfortunately, that I know that lots of people, especially as we see economic shifts and household incomes being affected, paying for beautiful soap is an investment, but then paying for shipping on top of that. So I have
Mhm.
seen that shift, I would say, in the past year of who my consumers are, I guess, right? And so being able to kind of adapt to that and to realize where the pain points are. So shipping, and then also just the length of time. I think that in Southern Canada, where there are other shipping options, and you're so much closer to where it's created. And so I feel like what I have tried to do is use it as an education moment. When people email asking why they haven't received their order, I tell a little story about where they're purchasing from, and I'm so grateful
Mhm.
for their business, but remind them that we are, in Canada's north, and the shipping routes are, quite long, and make a little joke about how it's coming by snowshoe, by dog sled, by toboggan, by ski, by kick sled, and
Uh-huh.
it'll get there and you'll love it and it'll be so worth it. But we just, reminded of
Yeah.
how incredibly large our country is.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough, and, it's made with love, and sometimes you just gotta be a little patient, in this world where people are used to, Amazon or, all these kinds of things. People are just used to having things immediately whenever they want, and, people forget that, before that time or before the delivery cars were going by, you might wait a few weeks, before you see something in the mail. So, yeah, I ship things to family overseas, and yes, it can be. There's always a. Is it going to get there? Are we going to track it? So yeah,
Yeah.
there's always something that's there. Well, I know that you know, uh, your heritage and being a member of the First Nation of Nacho Nayakdun is
Mhm.
something that's super important to you, and you're rooted in your community there. How do you integrate some of the indigenous knowledge and traditions into your business, and why is that important to you or important to your customers?
Yeah, I think I I was born and raised in Whitehorse and not deeply connected to the community or culture. And so I really saw that for many reasons, that we know of across Canada, that people are disconnected to community and culture for Indigenous people. And so I really thought, and I should also say my job before the soap business was working for my First Nation in the world of heritage and culture and language. So I was very fortunate that when I came to the community where my grandmother was from, that I was able to have that kind of a job. And so I was always with elders and listening to stories and teachings and that kind of thing. And so when I started to grow my business, I really saw an opportunity for me to relearn and reconnect to language, land, and culture through my business. And then next, I was like, I can use this as an opportunity for people that I bring into the fold of creating these products and selling. And then the next step was then sharing that with the community. And so it was kind of this progression of how can I root my business in my culture and teachings? How can I use it to help me relearn? And then how can I share that? And I think one of the big teachings that we have for Northern Shoshone people, which is the cultural group that I come from in Central Yukon, is 4 teachings of respect, sharing, caring, and teaching. And so I really try to do that in all aspects of our business, not just putting it on a label or a package, but really rooting it in ourselves. And so we have conversations amongst our team, like what does that mean? What does that look like on a practical day-to-day
Mhm.
business? And then being able to share that with other people.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, we've had different great women entrepreneurs on our show. We've been lucky that we've been able to find so many from so many different diverse backgrounds, and really bringing out the community aspect or their cultural values is something that we see quite a lot with women entrepreneurs, and trying to or find their purpose and then reflect that back into the brand. Is that something that you are there any products that you are making now that you feel um, hold or house that kind of traditional knowledge or your purpose in your products?
Yeah, I guess I would say all of our products do in how we harvest the plants, that is a big component of it, is getting people back on the land, harvesting with care, and not just, picking to fill their bucket to give to me to get paid and to have that reciprocal relationship, but going beyond that in reminding people on how to connect to the land, how to give thanks, and also teaching the language that we use to harvest plants. That's a big part of it. So all of that really goes into the smallest products, whether that's, a bath salt or a soap.
Okay, okay. And it sounds like you work with your team and your staff, and there's a deeply sort of rooted way or an intentional way that you're trying to do it. So it's not just grab grab whatever you see out in the forest and fill it up, but really thinking about what you're doing and being connected while you're doing that, so that to me, I would say good vibes or good energy are put back into the product, which is really what people are looking or excited about trying your soaps, because they would be so unique, and made with your intentions and good thoughts. So I really love that. I really love that. Well, one of the things, so you've been doing this for a while, and you're the leader of your group,
Mhm.
and one of the things we think about here at Onside, and also with our Start Now incubator for women, is really thinking about women in positions of leadership in their businesses and in their community. As a woman entrepreneur, are there some, and especially you're in the kind of consumer goods space, so you have like hard tangible products. Are there certain challenges that you have faced as a woman entrepreneur? And do you think that there are some things, I feel like this is a loaded question, but do you think that there are some things that the business environment and the industry could do better to support women-led companies?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think just creating the space for women-led businesses to shine and being able to bring those voices to the forefront. I often think of um, a friend, Tira Fraser, who owns an Indigenous woman who owns Esqueo Air, an airline out of British Columbia. She said it so best, and this is, I can never say it exactly right, but um, investing in Indigenous women-owned businesses is the most swift pathway to economic reconciliation in our country. And I just think that's such a beautiful way that we know how much impact women-owned businesses have on community and supporting each other in a different way. I think what's kind of missed from that is the truth part of truth and reconciliation, where, that for so long women weren't allowed to be a part of the economy and to own businesses or to have their own bank accounts and that kind of thing. And there's been so much growth, but there's still so much more room for women in leadership and women in business. Absolutely. I
Mm,
think the challenges that I would say I face are probably more from being First Nation as opposed to being a woman. But I think that's partly the nature of the business that I have, that it's soap, it's wellness. In the industry, it's still very much seen as like a craft or a hobby and not a legit business, right? I imagine if I was in a male-dominated field, I would see that impact or that gap a lot more.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading some statistics from there's a group, the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and
Mhm.
they actually say that amongst Indigenous-owned businesses, that Indigenous women, I think it's around 23% of all Indigenous-owned businesses, that Indigenous women have about 23% of that share, which is higher than the majority and the Canadian average. So Indigenous women are making strides in those spaces compared to others. Still, overall, like the number of Indigenous businesses in terms of like making that economic contribution that you're talking about, getting more women to be able to have their businesses. That's something that's really important. And you kind of mentioned, it sounded like because your business is in the health and wellness space, that you feel maybe um, a little bit more. I don't know if the word would be protected or something like that. Is that a feeling that you have, that maybe if you were in a different kind of business, because you mentioned sort of artisan or craft or something like that, does that make you feel like you're a bit more protected in that space, or as if you were in, I don't know, construction or something, that it might be a
Oh,
totally
yeah.
different experience?
Oh, yeah. If I had a construction company, I cannot even begin to imagine the barriers that I would face trying to scale and grow that business, get contracts compared to men-owned construction companies. That I just think that, those male-dominated fields, women breaking into that field, like, kudos to them, because that is an incredible feat. Whereas having this kind of business there is absolutely challenges, but I think it's a totally different set of challenges.
Okay, okay. It sounds like you have day-to-day business challenges and, the postage and these other kinds of things, but you're maybe not feeling quite as much. You don't have to have the double whammy of being an Indigenous-owned business and a women-owned
Mhm.
business in a super male-dominated space like construction or something like that. Yeah, yeah, I can definitely hear that. Um, well, you mentioned a little bit, just because you were talking about craft and, like, kind of the artisan nature of, your products, and we talked about you kind of going out with your team and harvesting, and I'd actually love to see that at some point if I ever get up there. But and you tend to use a lot of sustainable practices in sort of, bringing in the natural resources and things like that you're putting, into your products. Can you touch a little bit about, what are some of your thoughts around sustainability or sustainable practices? And, yeah, why don't we start there? I have another question, but I was like, let me just stick with one thing before I go off.
Yeah, I mean, this is sustainability is top of mind every day, and I feel like we are often faced with deciding like a sustainable choice versus a cheaper choice. I mean, and that goes for, I think, like all consumers and all people, that we're always weighting one thing against the other instead of having both. The key part here, I think, for me, is that sustainability looks different in the north and it looks different for Indigenous people. And so what we value in terms of caring for the land and being able to the land to continue to sustain us might look different than for the Southern consumer. And so the example that I often use is in the Southern markets, being organic is very important. That often health food stores, natural wellness shops will focus on organic and all of the certifications and everything. In the North, the questions that I get are more like, did you plant the plants? Like who's picking with you? And these are in good ways, not as in like attacking ways, but like, that's so beautiful. Like, are you going out in your community? Like, it's about the sustainability of the plants, the sustainability of the business, the connection to land and culture, which is everything that we're about. Very, very rarely do I get asked if my soaps are organic. Because I think that our values in the North and as Indigenous people, they just look different. And so in my heart, I'm always creating soaps for Yukoners and Northerners, and then the rest of Canada after that, or as I like to say, the people who want to be cool like Yukoners, because I think, and part of it is I think like. I did when I bought this business, I was like, okay, I need to create an organic line. But when you start to price it out, like in addition to the cost of shipping, buying organic is very expensive. And then creating a product that is completely organic so that you can put your stamp of organic, like the cost is so huge, but the cost of living in the North is already a lot. And I just, in talking to people, it just really wasn't that much of a priority that they wanted to know more. Yeah. Was I buying local? Was I harvesting the plants? Those kinds of things. So anyway, I know that's a bit of a long answer, but I would say that's kind of our thing, is being true to what our sustainability values are.
Yeah.
But also that we're always learning and we are always adapting. Right. And so our ideas will shift and our knowledge shifts. And so then maybe our formulas or our way of doing business shift also.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's so. I think that's such an interesting point, just around the different certifications and representations of your values. Are you, like people have like the B Corp, or are you friendly to the ocean, or like all of those kinds of things. And what I'm kind of hearing from you is that you've looked at those things and you've adjusted to like make it make sense in your local area and in your local context. So you're not just adapting something that's out there, but is a little disconnected from what you're seeing or what's important kind of locally. So in addition to the harvesting the plants at the right time and like how you do that and the way that you do that, there are a bunch of other different kinds of considerations and ways of thinking about like what does sustainability look like. And what I'm hearing is in the North, it looks a little bit different than maybe it looks, here in Halifax. So I think that's fantastic. And thanks for sharing that with us. You mentioned, what would be some things? So we're, sustainability, and you brought some interesting ideas for us to think about around sustainability and, how you incorporate that or how you think about that. And you mentioned, a little bit about, postage and some of those kinds of things. Are there other things that you found challenging as you've tried to like scale your business, but also try to keep it true to your traditional values or your traditional way of doing things? Have there been things that have like made it more challenging as you do that?
Yeah, and this is a conversation that I have had a few times with other Indigenous entrepreneurs, including last night. There was a group from the three territories that were talking about scaling and metrics for success. And I think one of our realizations, and it was said beautifully by our friend Nooks Lindell, who's a graphic design artist in Nunavut, but he talks about that it's okay to say no to growth, that scaling, which is a very like Western metric of success, isn't always important to us. And so it's okay to say no. And sometimes just having your business plateau so that you can have a work-life balance. You can have traditional activities in your calendar and being able to have that part of a good life, that having that kind of different balance is also a metrics of success, that it's not always about growth. And I think about that a lot because a few years ago, I built a soap shop here in Mayo to get production out of my house. So that was a huge shift. But I realized before it was even finished, it wasn't big enough for the demand. And so I was really at a hard place because I thought I confident that I could get, another mortgage, a bigger mortgage, or I could get investors to build a bigger workspace here for sure. But at the end of the day, who would work there? My community is only 400 people. Our labor pool is only so small. And so then that would mean bringing in workers from outside of the community and having housing. But that's not my model of supporting the community if we're adding growth and infrastructure and that kind of thing that way, right? So I was like, okay, I need to find a way to grow and be successful that doesn't necessarily mean a bigger workshop and bigger production in the community. And so I feel like we're often faced with those kinds of challenges.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's I'm thinking about a company here in Nova Scotia that's kind of in the Cape Breton region, a rural area as well, that was growing and growing, growing, and they had the same thing of trying to, if they kept growing, they also would need to get housing in a very small community,
Mhm.
and the logistics to do that and the impact to do that, was tricky or challenging. And so figuring out how to do that and how to grow well, I guess grow well, so you're not just
Yeah,
growing astronomically for no reason and having a negative impact, I guess, in your local community. Yeah.
exactly.
I wish I should have been there last night to get those insights and thinking about that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, you talked about, kinda growing, or you just mentioned kinda growing well, and you're in a consumer packaged goods or, hard goods area. You have your soaps and your oils and all the wonderful things I saw on your website. How do you think about, how do you approach sort of branding and distribution and kind of growing the market, for your product? Because your website looks amazing. I mean, you're sending stuff out through the mail. How do you think about that, or like, what's your approach to doing that?
Um, Probably not as strategic as it may look, that I feel like there is still a lot of chaos and randomness and beautiful magic, we'll say, happening behind the scenes. And I have a great team. I have a lovely young woman from our community, First Nation member, who does my website. And it's, yeah, I'm super lucky to have that. And so she actually helps me with a lot of the branding because I realized that was not my skill set, that I have like bigger vision kind of skill set, but when it comes down to details. And so I think that was something I learned earlier on, was bringing people into my team
Mhm.
who had the skills that complemented what and part of that is hiring young people, to complement me and to have those kinds of ideas. Um, and so I think in terms of like branding and messaging, you will have seen we try to include our language on there and specifically messages around mental health. That was really important to us, not to just have the word for the plant that we're using, but when people are washing with our products or having a soak with the bath salts, that is all a part of self-care and taking care of ourselves, and then our community is, that's all part of mental health wellness. So we wanted to include that in our packaging. And then we also strive to support our local artists and include our artwork on different packaging, and that has been so successful because our people are so, so proud when they're able to see themselves, their relatives, their community featured on our products in, shelves across Canada and going out to businesses across Canada, featured in magazines, and I think that's pretty exciting. And so I really see our packaging as being able to tell the story of a northern community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only imagine. That's really great. And you talked about kind of showcasing folks, your traditional knowledge, people, all those kinds of images and things like that to show and represent your community. And you talked a little bit about bringing young people and youth and things like that. And I know another thing that you've been particularly focused on is around economic empowerment or economic diversification. What are some things that you're kind of passionate about in that space, and what made you? I mean, I think I know, but let's for our audience. What made you excited, or what made you want to focus on economic empowerment in your community?
I mean, there's so many reasons, but when people think of the Yukon, I think they mostly think of mining and the gold rush and the Klondike and that kind of thing. But that's not necessarily our story to tell. And I think our part of that story is more tragic and sad in terms of loss of land and resources and culture and all of those shifts that we saw. So what I try to focus on is the economic opportunities that we now have in our community, and to reimagine, I think, a future that is different, where our people do have a voice, our people are able to buy land and to have businesses and to support themselves and their community, and that those businesses can be whatever you want them to be, but they can also support culture and connection to land and language that I talk about so much, and that doesn't need to be separate, that we can have those businesses that are rooted in culture and reconnect. And that's actually what I think when our elders and leaders created our self-government agreements. And so for Canadians, if you're not familiar with self-government, please look that up. Our First Nation was one of the first 4 in the Yukon and across Canada to create those agreements. And it was all about empowering our people. And I really, truly believe that they saw our people having businesses that were different and rooted in culture and language. And
Mm-hmm.
so I try to encourage people to test out entrepreneurship and to have their own businesses. So, whether it's kids having a lemonade stand or helping me to make a different product. I often use lip balms because people are like, "Why don't you make lip balms?" And I'm like, "Why don't you make lip balms? Let's figure this out together. Why don't you do tea? Well, why don't you do tea? Like, let's do this together. I can help you, and we can find ways to do that." And I think, there was a young woman in our community who is a part of the team, and she wanted to have a little shop in another community. And I said, "Well, why don't we do it together? We'll do it under the Yukon Soaps kind of brand, and you work there, sell your stuff, and let's see if it's a fit for you." So it was a great learning opportunity, but I took on that risk instead of her, and was able to mentor a little bit. And in the end, it wasn't for her. It was, yeah, just being able to support people that way, to try out their ideas, to be brave, to be creative, and to take risks. That's what I want people to see.
Oh, it sounds like you're, and I know you have like focus on having like a community hub and things like that. It sounds like you, in your business, have created what I would say is like a little incubator, where people could, or if it makes sense, if I'm hearing you correctly, there's someone who wanted to try out a product. It was a little risky. We helped her de-risk it, get some mentorship, get some product advice, and all this kind of stuff. So you may not realize this, or you have your own way of doing it, but it's kind of like having a little incubator to support other folks who are interested in trying things. I think that's fantastic.
Interesting. Well, I love having those kinds of conversations and hearing what ideas people have, and how can I support people to do it. Like, what I'm so grateful to have access to so many tools, resources, connections. And so let's make some magic happen for people.
Yeah, yeah, gotta make the magic happen. In terms of making the magic happen, what is something that you wish that you would have known so that you could make the magic happen easier? Or, like, what's something that you wish you had known?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one is learning that you can say no. Especially as you're growing, you do not have to take every opportunity, every aspect. People will, for example, people would say, "Why aren't you doing lip balms?" That kind of thing. Like, no, I'm focusing on soap. No.
Mhm.
Why don't you do whatever, such a thing? No. So it's having that clear vision and staying true to your vision, especially in the day of social media when you are bombarded with other brands, other ideas, other influences and influencers. Really staying true to what your particular vision is and not sidetracked. That I,
Mm.
that I wish, because there was a few times where I feel like I did get derailed a little bit, and it can cost time and money and your own creativity and bandwidth even, right? And so, yeah, being able to stay focused and learning that no is an okay answer. And
Yeah.
that saying no creates space for the next yes.
Ah, I love that. I love that. I need to learn how to say no to some things in my personal life and just to,
Yeah.
all the obligations because you get so
Yeah.
excited and when you're in business, it's so creative and energizing and you just want to do all of the things. But yeah, you're right. You can't do all the things and it sucks up your energy and then you can't actually even do the thing that your main thing that you were supposed to be doing. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What about some advice for Indigenous women entrepreneurs? Do you have any advice that would say maybe might be applicable kind of Canada wide, or maybe something for your area in the Yukon? Is there any advice that you might have?
Yeah, I mean, I think reach out to people in your circle. Like everybody is rooting for you, even though it may not seem like that. But I think my advice is the same to any entrepreneur starting out, but is really to like know your numbers, right? That if you want to be serious and successful business and change it from a hobby or an idea, you really need to pay attention to, your profit margins and your expenses and costs and make sure that you are making money so that you can growth and reinvest that money back into your business or your community and be able to pay yourself. And I think that is a big a big thing, your numbers. But then also I think I touched on it earlier, but staying true to what your values are and let those values guide you and don't compromise those at all, because that will, I think, will lead to regret.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You gotta have the numbers. We had a
Mhm.
pricing workshop couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and that was a big thing for a lot of the women in our programs. Is like figuring out how to price your product at a level that's high enough so that you can generate actual income, so that you can keep doing your business and
Mhm.
and pay yourself. Because
Yeah,
if you're not paying yourself, that money is coming from somewhere, or that, your energy, your free labor, or something like that. So, ladies, price well and make money and contribute to yourself and your
yes,
communities. Okay,
100%.
well, yeah, 100%, 100%. Well, how about we're gonna wrap up shortly, but I'm curious if there's anything new on the go that you have with Yukon Soaps that you're excited about, or any new initiatives or things that you want people to know about.
Yeah, I think our biggest thing is we have just kind of soft launched doing hotel amenities. And so we have started putting those in small hotels and lodges. And so shampoo, conditioner, body wash, in a dispenser that features artwork from one of our First Nation artists here. And it's so beautiful, and people are really interested in it. And yeah, we're looking forward to that taking off and being seen in more places across Canada, hopefully.
Okay, I love it. I love it. I'm going to be rooting for you if I'm traveling around. Hopefully, I'll see it in the hotels, and I'll be one of those
Yes.
ones who's going to take that extra soap from the hotel. But that's been so great. I appreciate all of your thoughts and your insights and sharing what you're up to with Yukon Soap Company. Joella, thank you so much for joining the show. I guess one last thing would be just if people want to learn more about you or your business, how can people learn about you or stay in touch?
Yeah, so of course our website, yukonsoaps.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, and Instagram is where we are the most active.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. And with that, I want to thank all of our listeners here today at the Onside Podcast. Of course, you can subscribe and like the Onside Podcast. You can learn more about Onside and the Start Now Incubator on our websites, Instagram, all of those great things. And we're so happy to have you here today. And for everybody else, we hope to see you in the future. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, Joella, stay on for 2 seconds.
Yeah. Woohoo!
Woohoo!